before I worked at Deal, I was selling to sales and marketing personas. In a way, I guess in my head, I was like, oh, this is so much easier to sell by like video LinkedIn because that's where all these prospects live, and this is the type of outreach they're going to really enjoy. So it kind of always worked previously. And then coming into Deal, I was kind of like, is this approach going to work well for CFOs or HR leaders, for example? And a lot of SDRs have kind of said to me, that's not going to work in my industry because I sell to CFOs who are not going to appreciate a voice note on LinkedIn.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another SDR Game podcast episode. Today we have a very special guest, Holly Allen. BDR at Deal since January 2023. Her performance at Deal is she averaged 260% of target in Q1. She got the Rookie of the Quarter and Influencer Award in Q1. And in May, she booked 23 meetings so far. She's on the SME team, and SME at Deal is accounts with up to 200 people, and the buyer persona she's going after are CEOs, CFOs, and people leaders. On top of Deal, she co-hosts the LinkedIn Social Selling Masterclass alongside Daniel Disney at Sales Impact Academy. And before Deal, she was an SDR leader, account executive, and also BDR G2, selling to marketing and sales leaders. You can follow her on LinkedIn, Holly Allen, HOLLYALLEN.
You don't need like loads of fancy tools to be successful as an SDR. I really don't think you do. I think you just need like energy, motivation, and a good kind of brand on LinkedIn, sharing content that's relevant. I think that is really key, as opposed to, loads of different AI tools or whatnot.
Today, we will dive in our strategies and our insights into what it takes to be the Rookie of the Quarter. When we are preparing this episode, you mentioned that we are talking about what makes you successful and why you got the award of the Rookie of the Quarter. And something really interesting you mentioned, and I think will be interesting for the audience and as you're listening, is you mentioned that you don't use sequences or cold emails in your outreach. What's the reason for that?
I'm a little bit different to like some of my colleagues, and I know a lot of SDRs and salespeople out there, in that I tend to not send any or very many emails at all. The reason being, I think that nowadays it's so difficult for SDRs to really stand out. And I don't think it's possible to stand out that much if you are just going to email people. The chances are your email is either going to go to their spam folder, or it's just going to be sat in their inbox with, hundreds of other emails from other SDRs and probably not get read. And when I started my role at Deal, I was, putting sequences together. I was sending out emails and spending like 5 to 10 minutes per email, personalizing it, really going to town on that personalization. Like, I was writing poems for prospects. I was honestly doing the absolute most. And these emails weren't getting seen. And I think it's just a case now of, so many SDRs are doing the same thing, where we're just putting people into sequences, sending emails, that it's really hard to stand out. So I know that we will talk more about this, but I think, the kind of social selling strategy, LinkedIn, calling, that's what's a little bit different, and that's what's going to help you really stand out to your prospects and really get noticed.
How long did it take you to start sending emails? It was like a month or 2 months?
Probably about a month, 6 weeks. I wanted to kind of like give it a good go. I wanted to see out the end of my sequences and whatnot. But alongside emailing, I was still doing all my social stuff, and that was the stuff that was really getting results. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm spending so much time a week on emails. Like, what am I doing this for, when all the social stuff that I enjoy a lot more as well is the stuff that's getting seen and getting results.
Here also you are really self-aware also on what's working for you and what you're enjoying. And I think sometimes it's easier to double down on what's working for you instead of just trying to make something working that's going to take a lot of time to work. So social selling, can you explain why is it your favorite social selling? And I know cold calling also is your favorite approach to prospect, but why do you think it's more effective? And can you explain why it's your favorite way of prospecting?
So we'll start with social selling because that's definitely my passion. As you mentioned in my intro, I co-host a social selling masterclass over at Sales Impact Academy, and that really is like my thing. It's the thing that gets me out of bed every morning and makes me excited. And it has definitely been a journey. You know, I've been in the sales world for coming up to like 3 years now, and like building my personal brand has been something I've been working and working and working on the whole time. But the reason that I really enjoy it is, I mean, it gets results, right? You know, it definitely is a hobby, and I really enjoy like sharing content on LinkedIn. I really enjoy building my personal brand. I love social media as a person anyway, and so LinkedIn kind of feels like a nice extension of that. But the reason I think it works really well is, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the sales space is so saturated now. There are so many SDRs. We're all trying to get the attention of our prospects. And quite frankly, a lot of people are getting fed up with outreach. You know, you only have to go on LinkedIn to see people saying that they're fed up of salespeople and whatnot. And I think that posting on LinkedIn, building a personal brand, it essentially enables you to kind of show people that you are so much more than just a salesperson. It allows you to show people that you are a real human being. And I think that really helps to build with the trust element. You know, people aren't going to talk to you or buy from someone that they don't trust. And so by building a personal brand, posting content, social selling, it makes you seem like a real human being as opposed to, you know, just another email address, for example, in someone's inbox.
I'm really right with what you're saying about this, because also I think, like you said, prospects, they are getting a lot of emails from SDRs or other salespeople, but also from the buyer experience, from our prospect perspective. One example, I'm selling a product that maybe we have like 10 competitors. Making this difference will make the difference for them, because generally the product, they are pretty similar. So, and it's not about the product anymore now. The why people are making the decision on buying a specific product, it's they are buying it also for the experience we're giving them, and it starts with us as an SDR standing out in their inbox, and the experience we give them at the beginning. So definitely align with this. So I know you mentioned, so we were talking about LinkedIn right now, and you don't use a sequence. Could you walk us through into, let's say, you pick a new account, and you want to go after this account. So what's your process with this account? Are you starting with looking for the people at the account, but then what do you do to engage with those prospects?
So I find new accounts, you know, daily, as I'm sure that we all do. So this could be subscribing to things like the funding letter, so I know which accounts have got money that they're going to want to come and spend at deal, hopefully. Then what I'm doing is obviously researching those accounts. You know, is this potentially a fit at all? From there, I'm going to use a tool called Sales Navigator, but you can do this through LinkedIn search, where I'm going to search for my personas in the company. And then typically my kind of first step is just to connect with that person on LinkedIn. So send a connection request. You can build lead lists in Sales Navigator. So that's what I tend to do. A lot of SDRs often say to me, you know, LinkedIn activity is quite hard to track. Because, you know, you have to kind of log it manually to like a CSM, for example. So typically what I do is build a lead list, connect with my prospects, as many as like I can. And then
I have two questions here. One, for the connection request, do you send a blank connection request or do you personalize it?
99% of the time I send it blank. Unless there's like a really compelling message, like, you know, hey, Elric, was great to meet you at that event last night. I will always send it blank. I've just found like I've kind of A/B tested it, and that's what gets more accepts.
And then you started to talk about the lead list to track your prospects. So how, do you have one list or do you have different lists, or what's your process with this?
So typically I'll make like a new list every week, or like bi-weekly. I'm not kind of too like process driven with this, but I'll just have a list, and then when prospects accept my connection request, it will notify me in that lead list. So it's a nice, easy way to track. If you don't have Sales Navigator though, you can also just use normal LinkedIn, go onto your connections, and the most recent ones will show up first. And then as soon as that prospect has connected with me, I'm going to go onto their profile, refer back to the notes I've made about their company, and I'm going to usually go in with a voice note. Voice notes for me work really, really well. And I know for like SDRs at Deal that have started using them, they work really well for them as well, just in terms of getting a response. Often people will say things like, didn't even know you could send a voice note on LinkedIn, or, thanks so much for the unique approach. People normally always comment on it, which is, obviously nice.
Before talking specifically about what you say in the voice note, so you are talking about you have a note for the account. So you are talking about the funding letter earlier. What are you looking for in an account? What the triggers are you looking for?
Yeah, great question. So if an account has funding, I'm going to want to know like what the growth focus is with that. So in my case, it's pretty simple. It's, are they looking to break into a new region or expand in a certain location? They're things for me that are like, make my brain ping, and I'm like, okay, I can reach out about that. Also just little things like, things I see on someone's profile. Do they say that they're hiring, for example? That's very kind of relevant to Deal and where we could potentially come in. On their profile, are they talking about topics that are relevant to Deal that, if I talk about global payroll, for example, and I'm prospecting to a CFO, like, are they going to get excited when I use that buzzword in the voice note?
So you have two kind of research. So you have on the account and then also on the people you're going after.
Yeah, and I think the people element is super important. I was speaking with one of my AEs today who's smashing it, and I was like, what's your secret? Like, how are you doing so well? He's really new to the company, and he was like, because I just care about people. I'm not trying to pitch the product. I'm not trying to make their company sound special. I'm trying to make that individual feel special. So if you're going to send a voice note to someone and it takes like 20, 30 seconds to go on someone's profile, look at some content they've recently been posting or sharing, engaging with, and just have a bit of an insight into, okay, what does this person care about? What can I say that's going to make them feel really special? Like this voice note, really was made for them, and I really want to speak to them.
Do you set a limit for researching your accounts and people, the account? Like, do you have like a 5? I don't know. Do you say, oh, okay, for this account, I will just research them for 10 minutes and then I move to the next one? Or what?
Yeah, I mean, typically I would say it probably takes no more than like 3 minutes, really.
Okay.
Once you've kind of, what I tend to do is do all of my like account research in one go. So I'll go on to like the funding letter, for example. Maybe that's like a half an hour exercise where I'm finding new accounts. I've got like a little spreadsheet up, I'm inputting my notes, then I'm finding the contacts. And as soon as they accept me on LinkedIn, referring back to that sheet and then going onto their LinkedIn profile, like that should take 2 minutes maximum.
Now you have something about the account or other person you are going after. So you said you send a voice note. So how do you structure it? And could you give us an example of what you're saying?
I will always go in like super high energy, make them feel really excited when they're pressing play. So, hey, Elric, thanks so much for connecting with me on here. I wanted to drop you this quick voice note as I notice you have an awesome podcast. I actually listened to your episode with whoever and really loved the point about X and Y. So like always kind of going in with something hyper personalized to make them feel like you've really done your research. And then I will try and bring that back to a conversation about deals. So, on the note of global hiring, I was really curious to know how it currently works with, and then maybe name drop a couple employees that would be like relevant to Deal, how this works with having them set up over in Mexico. Not sure if you've heard of Deal before, Elric, but we help companies like yourselves, or we help HR leaders like yourselves with X and Y. Something I've been doing recently is ending the voice note with a phrase like, you're probably going to tell me you've got this all sorted, or you're probably going to tell me this isn't relevant, but if this voice note has intrigued you at all, then let me know, Elric. I'd love to have a chat with you. I always try and keep the voice note between like 30 to 45 seconds, so not too long. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
What I really like about what you mentioned here, for example, if you give my podcast as an example, and then you are talking about a specific part of the episode, I really like that because it's really specific and you can't fake that, because generally you have people who are going to reach out because I'm receiving that, so that's why you know that, and they're going to say, "Hey, I love your podcast," and that's it. And that's I think that's okay, but it's not specific at all, because you can't send that to everyone with a podcast, and so you don't say, you are not saying why did you enjoy about the podcast, and here it's pretty specific. It's going to stand out to your prospect because say, okay, this person really care about me and they listen to my podcast. And the second thing also, it's really like the call to action, the way you are ending your voice note. It's I think it's in a good way to making fun of sending this voice note and to start the conversation with them.
As you say, it's like being specific. I think a lot of SDRs think that personalization is just a case of saying like, hey Elric, really loved your last post, and they think like that's enough. But you do have to kind of really go in a little bit deeper, find out your facts, and that doesn't take long, right? It takes like 2 seconds to, you know, with all due respect, I could easily click on one of your podcast episodes, like fast forward to 3 minutes in and just listen to a point for 30 seconds and then reference that in a message. Like it is pretty easy.
I'm doing that also for my prospects at Castor, and right now I'm working on some specific podcasts where they have the transcript, and I'm looking for specific keyword into the episode, so it's pretty quick also to help you doing the research on that. I have a question. So you are talking about, for example, that you are asking questions about specific employees. Here also, I think it's a great way also to stand out, because another way to show you've done your research, because I imagine you are using LinkedIn Fast enough to show this. Are you looking for specific location? For example, if you see that the CFO is based in London, and then you see that you have some employees in Mexico or another country, that's what you're looking for? Or?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's again a super easy search. You know, you go onto Sales Nav, you just filter location, like what that takes 10 seconds less to like pull up some names. And yeah, it feels very specific to that prospect when you're saying like, I notice you have Elric who's out in Mexico, like that suddenly feels very hyper personalized and it takes no time at all.
Do you add something on top of the voice note, or you just send the voice note without any text message or any context?
Yeah, this is a really good question. This is something I'm kind of trialing at the moment, actually. So I was sending them completely blank up until about 2 months ago, when I had a great chat with Neil Boyan, who's a sales coach. If you don't follow him, go and follow him. He's awesome. And he was saying, because I was prospecting to CEOs and I wasn't really getting anything back from the voice notes. And he was saying, you know, if you're a CEO, your inbox is probably full on LinkedIn as well. Like, why should a CEO listen to your voice note? Like, why should they? You've given no context about what it's about. So something I have started doing for certain prospects, and it has been working quite well, is saying, you know, hey, Elric, not spam or a virus, with like a little arrow up and a laughing face. And then just saying something like, just a quick note on your employee, Holly Allen, that's based in Mexico. Let me know what you think. So like short, sweet, but something that is going to kind of get their attention, you know, not just like just a note on global hiring, something that's like really boring. If you're giving like a specific name of an employee, for example, or a specific point about something they've mentioned in a post, that's going to grab their attention.
Yeah, and again, specific here, because you show that you've done your research. And second thing, it will create curiosity in your prospect, because they want to know what about this employee. So let's say you send your voice notes and then you don't get replies. What do you do next?
If I don't get a reply, I'll send a message either the next day or 2 days later, just saying something like, hey, Elric, what did you think of the voice note? Something kind of short, sweet, direct. If they then don't reply, ideally I can get access to a mobile number. So if they don't reply, I'll give them a call. If I can't get access to a mobile number, then I might send another message saying something like, was it really that bad, with like a sad meme or a broken heart emoji or like something like that. It does kind of depend though, there are some prospects where you kind of think, like maybe they won't appreciate a sad meme or, of like a cat crying. But if you can tell that maybe they're a little bit more like playful by their profile, then I'd always go in with something like that. Um, and then if I don't get a response, then I'll go in either with like a video saying, hey, looks like the voice note didn't work, so coming at you with a video instead. This is why I've been reaching out. Short, sweet. Or I'll go in with a message just saying, maybe you didn't have time to listen to the voice note, completely fair. Here's what I was outlining, and go in with like more of a text.
So this video, how long after the second message do you send it?
This whole process is probably a 10-day, week to 10-day thing. It depends on other things like, there are some cues that LinkedIn will give you. So if someone has like seen your message, then often their profile photo will appear at the end of the message that you've sent, if that makes sense. So you can see that they've opened it. So if I can see they've opened it, I'm going to be a lot more active. But if like, or sometimes it'll say, last active 72 hours ago, then I'll give them a bit more time until I know that they have been online. So yeah.
So the video you're selling, are you using a tool or are you using the LinkedIn app on your phone to send the video?
So I use Vidyard or Loom. I try not to use selfie videos. That's something I used to do when I was an SDR at G2, and that didn't really go down too well. I think maybe it looks a little bit too kind of informal. So typically like a Vidyard or a Loom where like I'm sharing the prospects LinkedIn profile or their company page, something to really grab their attention.
And do you, same question as the voice note, do you, on top of the video, do you send like a message to create some curiosity about the video?
Yeah, absolutely. Just something like, looks like the trusty voice note didn't work, so here's a video instead. Hopefully this will grab your attention. Something like that.
How long are your videos in general?
Always under a minute. As short and sweet as possible, but it is so difficult. Like I always end up getting to like 59, 60 seconds and then I'm like, okay, bye.
Because I know there is a GIF on video or Loom generally. So what do you do to stand out here? So do you wave your hand or what do you do to be different?
So I always make sure it's like an animated one. I don't normally wave. I think sometimes, I don't know, I feel a bit weird when I'm like waving in the animation. But normally I think, like I say, having like their LinkedIn profile or having a post up that they've done that's like already on the screen, I think that's a good way to get them to watch it. And I think just going in like loads of energy, that's what's going to grab people's attention and going to like make them want to watch. And also like making fun of the fact that they have ignored you. I think people quite like that as well.
After sending this video, if you don't get a reply, what do you do?
If there's a number there, then I'll try ringing. If not, then probably reach out to other people in the company and maybe reference the person that you've been like trying to reach out to, if they come back to you. But yeah, just trying to multi-thread as much as possible.
Do you wait until sending the video to start multi-threading, or are you starting to multi-thread an account at this? Starting to prospect those prospects at the same time.
Once I found the account and I'm doing my initial connections, I always try and connect with like as many relevant people in the company as possible. But let's say like 4 people accepted all at once, I'd probably go after like 1 or 2, see if I have success there. And then if not, then I'll like go after the others. So I won't kind of do everyone in one go.
You said that, for example, if they don't reply to the video, you try to call them. How do you structure your calls? Do you have a same process for every conversation? I know when we were preparing this episode, you said that you are focusing more on having a conversation with them instead of just pitching. So what's your process with cold calls?
Process with cold calls? Yes, good question. So cold calls are something that up until, well, to be honest, still now, I just have the absolute fear of cold calling, but I do think they are, like, for me this month, they've definitely been the kind of quickest and best way just to book in those meetings. So for me personally, I don't really like the whole, Elric, this is a cold call. Do you have 30 seconds? I just feel it's just not right for me personally. It feels a bit awkward. I feel a bit silly saying it. So when someone answers the phone, I just go in like super enthusiastic to make them feel excited about the call. I think often what a lot of SDRs do, and I used to do this, is they start a call really nervously. They'll be like, "Oh hi, is that Elric?" And it's just immediately, it just feels awkward. So if I was ringing you, I'd be like, "Hello, Elric. This is Holly here at Deal. Hopefully that name rings a bell. How are you doing?" Like, just go in super confident, make them almost feel like they kind of should know who you are in a way. And yeah, typically that gets good responses. I normally say something like, for my kind of permission based opener, mine will be something like, "Elric, have I caught you at a terrible time? Or do you have a moment to speak?" Something like that, that isn't as like, "But do you have 30 seconds?" And then just kind of go from there.
You said that you don't like to use the opener saying, "Hey, it's a cold call." I think I just shared this on LinkedIn 2 or 3 days ago, talking about this actually. So you need to try different openers and see what's working for you. And here, I think that's a perfect example, because you want to use something that's you, and not using what's working for maybe another person. Because on the cold call, like you said, it's always, I think cold call is maybe the toughest channel to master as an SDR, and you want to make sure you are using something that suits your personality. And so I think that's a really, really good example here. Now, let's say if they say yes, they have time. So what do you say then?
So it really depends on kind of what the situation is. So if we've spoken before, and this would be a top tip, this is something I did, like, as I've kind of started to get more comfortable with making cold calls, I always try and ring closed lost opportunities, or like people that I've briefly spoken with on LinkedIn, always. So I'll normally go in with something like, "I wanted to give you a call because I know you spoke with a colleague of mine back in October about how Deal could support you with hiring EORs and contractors over in Mexico." And then I'll go in with, something about why I'm reaching out now. Noticed on LinkedIn you are currently hiring, and it looks like the roles are listed as fully remote. How's that process going? Like, something like that. Open question, get them to talk.
What I really like here also, it's same. You are being specific. You are obviously leveraging that they know you, for they know Deal. They had the demo maybe of Deal in the past 6 months, and then you say something about right now, about what's relevant for them right now. It's not just, "Hey, you talked with us 6 months ago. Hey, is it now a good time to talk about Deal?" No, it's, "I know you talked with us 6 months ago, but now I know you're hiring people in Mexico. So now you've done you are showing that you've done your research." So really like that. So you start the conversation around this. So and do you have any questions in mind to ask them, or so you just want to see what they are currently doing to hire those people in Mexico? What's your process here?
I don't follow like a kind of set script or set questions. Obviously, I know in my mind, what it is that means, okay, yeah, this would make a great demo, for example. Like, I kind of already know those triggers of what's going to make it a sales qualified opportunity. But it will just be, how is that process going? Are you currently looking at EORs or ICs, or just kind of using that terminology that like they will know, that is related to Deal? And then trying to just kind of like, if they do say, "Oh yeah, we are looking at this, but this is a bit tricky," or just really sympathizing with that point. "Oh yeah, when I speak to other HR leaders, actually, it does seem that that's like a bit of a tricky situation at the moment," and then kind of relating it back to how we could potentially help. The other thing I do on calls that I think is a good trick for a couple different reasons is always try and summarize their points. So if they say something as simple as, yeah, we're looking to hire in Mexico at the moment, most of our employees are in the UK and the US, but we are looking at Mexico, to then literally be like, okay, cool. So it sounds like most of your employees are in, and basically say back to them what they've told you. The reason why I think this is effective is because number one, it makes that prospect feel like they're heard, like you're really listening to what they say as opposed to just going back with a question. Also, it buys you a little bit of time to kind of think about where you want to take the conversation next. And it's almost a bit of like a refresher for you to kind of be like, okay, this is the situation. Where can I go from here? So that's something I always try and do.
When you know that the deal could be a good fit, how do you end the call?
So I'll typically say something like, Elric, appreciate I've caught you on your Friday afternoon, and I don't want to keep you any much longer. Would it make sense for us to have a quick call later next week to discuss this in a bit more detail? Just something like that normally, or hopefully they'll say yes, and then I just go in with, okay, perfect. What day works for you? Or, Tuesday's looking pretty light on our side. Would that work for you?
I know you are focusing a lot on social selling and cold calls. So how do you manage your time between both channels? Do you have like specific blocks on your calendar, or how do you balance?
Yeah, so I try and stick to my calendar blocks as much as possible. But I think with calling, it is something that you really have to be like geared up and ready to do. Certainly for me, it's someone who does still have the fear a little bit. So for me, it's a case of if I come in on a Monday morning and I'm super energized, then I'll be like, right, let me just smash it and get the calls done. And that's typically what I try and do. I try and do my calls like first thing. We have a call target, so I've just kind of got them done. Equally though, if I come in on a morning and I log on and I can see that I've got like loads of new LinkedIn connection requests from the day before, then I might do like a kind of power hour or 45-minute voice note block where I'm just like smashing out as many voice notes as possible. And then I know that that's done, and then I can kind of crack on with my calls. But I do think like designating time in your calendar, I think as well, like designating more than an hour. It's very easy to just put like hour blocks for calls or voice notes in, but really you do need a bit more time, I think, to really make it beneficial. So I always try and do like a kind of 2 to 3 hour call block with little breaks in between. Yeah.
So you said a few times in the episode that you have still the fear of making cold calls. So what worked for you to overcome this fear?
The first thing, like being held accountable. So we've had like a new call target brought in this month, which at first I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? This is awful. But it actually really, really helped because it was like, look, I have to make this many calls a day. Like that is a non-negotiable. So I think accountability, number one, whether that's getting your manager involved, like adding them to maybe a call block to just kind of like check in and make sure you're doing it. Number two, finding like low hanging fruits or prospects that might be more open to talking to you, i.e. working with A's on like a closed lost report, so that you can kind of ring those like warmer prospects, going through your LinkedIn connection requests and connections and calling those so that it feels less kind of daunting and cold, shall we say. Um, and I think like with that, for example, this week I don't think I've had anyone that's been like super super rude to me or told me to go away, because that definitely does still knock my confidence when that happens. But I think just like setting yourself up for that to happen as like least as possible, that's a good tip. And I would say just little things like whatever it is that puts you in like a good mood, gives you the energy. For me, I always cold call with like music on. Normally I'll like go to the gym or go out for a walk and then come back, designate some time to do it, put my phone away, and just kind of smash through it as quickly as I can, really.
Well, I really like in what you said here. It's you are focusing a lot on the warmer prospects on your list, and I think it's key also on cold calls because you want to focus on first on the easiest conversation, because getting the rhythm of cold calling with those prospects is going to give you the energy to do the rest. Because if you call the coldest or maybe the hardest one, it's not going to give you like energy or motivation to do the rest of the list. So I think it's really smart to do this way. I know when we were preparing this episode, you mentioned that moving a deal, you are starting to work with CEOs, CFOs, but also people leaders. And people told you that social selling doesn't work on this specific buyer persona. So what was your thought process with CFOs when you started at Deal? Did you say, yeah, I'm going to try social selling? So what was your process here?
Before I worked at Deal, I was selling to sales and marketing personas. And in a way, I guess in my head, I was like, oh, this is so much easier to sell by like video, LinkedIn, because that's where all these prospects live. And, you know, this is the type of outreach they're going to really enjoy. So it kind of always worked previously. And then, yeah, coming into Deal, I was kind of like, is this approach going to work well for CFOs or HR leaders, for example? And even when I've spoken about social selling before, a lot of SDRs have kind of said to me, that's not going to work in my industry because I sell to CFOs who are not going to appreciate a voice note on LinkedIn, because I guess there's this kind of like stigma almost that these people are going to be more like formal and would prefer like an email. And I think because of this stigma, because not many SDRs are reaching out to CFOs with a video or a voice note, it works really, really well. People are almost like, I guess in a way, like too scared to call up these CFOs because they have this kind of view of what they might be like in their heads. But actually, those people that do, it's almost like a kind of welcome surprise for these CFOs. You know, I'm not going to say it's all the time, but I've certainly seen the most success I've had has actually been with this persona, ironically. Going in with a voice note, and they're normally always the ones that comment like, didn't even know LinkedIn had this functionality, or, you know, never received a voice note before. It's something different, and I guess it's something that, you know, kind of breaks up their like mundane day-to-day sorting out payroll. I'm sure that they love it, but, you know, it's something a little bit different, right, that no one is really doing with them. So yeah.
So we are almost at the end of the episode, so I have a few more questions for you. So what's your favorite tool to help you prospecting on LinkedIn?
I would say probably Sales Navigator. I know that's like such a boring one, but honestly, it just for like finding accounts, making my lead list. I really think that you don't need like loads of fancy tools to be successful as an SDR. I really don't think you do. I think you just need like energy, motivation, and a good kind of brand on LinkedIn, sharing content that's relevant. I think that is really key, as opposed to, you know, loads of different AI tools or whatnot.
And how do you continue to learn and improve in your role as an SDR? And are there any specific resources you are going after or learning methods you find particularly valuable?
Yeah, so I would say probably two main things. One is Gong. So we have Gong, which is a call recording system over at Deal. I'm sure a lot of people know about it. So really useful to, you know, number one, listen back to your own calls, which is very daunting, but I would encourage you to do that. Number two, listening to calls with account executives. This is valuable because you can actually hear about the real pain points that your prospects are feeling. Often it's on those calls where a HR leader, for example, will open up about those problems that are keeping her up at night. So it's good to kind of hear those from a person that's actually living and breathing it. And then I would say the other thing really is just like using LinkedIn, engaging in content, really kind of looking at my feed a couple times a day to see what people are sharing, what people care about. That is something that I definitely learn a lot from.
And what advice will you give to a new SDR, and what advice should they ignore?
So my number one tip, and this is a bit of a cringy tip, but I would say it would be to just be you. I think like everyone's superpower is that you are you, no one else can be you. And so really try and bring that into your prospecting, bring your personality into your prospecting, whether that's through emails, cold calls, creating memes, like whatever it is, because no one will be able to have that kind of same unique spin on it as you do. So that would be my kind of number one tip. What I would say don't do is don't think that more volume necessarily means more results. You could send like 1,000 automated emails that will probably get you nowhere. I mean, they might do, but I would highly doubt it. and spend like all day doing that, or you could maybe send like 5 to 10 hyper personalized voice notes that you might get 2 to 3 responses from, for example. So I think like working longer and like doing more and sending more and more volume doesn't always mean more results. So find what works for you, perfect that, and do that.
I love that. Well, Holly, thank you so much to be on the show today. It was a really fun conversation and interesting conversation. But before we end the episode, do you want to share anything else to the audience?
Go and build your personal brands on LinkedIn. Start posting content. Start sharing with your network. Engaging content. That would be my absolute biggest number one tip, and definitely the thing that's helped me the most.
Well, thank you so much. It was nice to see you. And for everyone listening, I'll see you on the next episode.